A young woman doesn't drive home after work and is found raped and murdered.
She was supposed to be here for a few weeks, and she was killed during her second week here in Colorado.
A witness helps to make a composite sketch, but the killer isn't found.
This is not what officers were hoping for.
Police have very little to go on.
Years pass and technology advances. It's a case no one could forget.
I have to dig in there and figure out if I can solve this.
A killer who walked in the shadows is on the radar.
They're not going to let her memory fade, and they're not going to give up looking for her killer.
Once he had the advantage, now he's the unsuspecting one.
He nearly got away with it. He could have just disappeared into the night.
When justice stalks the predator.
The unsolved ones, we have to stand up
and approach these cases in a way outside the box.
Let the world know is those out there that did commit a murder, there are people that are coming after you.
There's just a lot of good people trying to do the right thing.
Because it's something that you have to be passionate about.
Solve this. Bring some peace to the family, at least. Just doing my job.
It's a sharp, biting winter night in Englewood, Colorado. Helen, a punctual, reliable young woman, should have come home straight after work. Her routine every day is like clockwork, but they're still waiting for her.
Her shift at the radio station ends at 5:30 p.m. From there, she walks 2 blocks to a bus stop at the corner of 14th Avenue and Broadway and catches a bus to Englewood. She gets off in front of a pizzeria at Union Avenue and Broadway and walks 6 blocks to a home where she's staying with her aunt and uncle and a classmate. This gets her home at about 6:30 p.m.
Right away, the people waiting for her believe that something is wrong. They waste no time. They drive to her bus stop, go along the streets where they know she'd walk, and call her work. They walk up and down the street looking for any clue as to what may have happened to Helen.
When they can find no answers, they call police. It's 10:30 p.m. when an officer arrives to take a missing persons report.
They've done everything they can at this point and are forced to just wait.
At 11 p.m., Helen's friend Kitsy Snow writes an entry into her journal. This day has been the longest and worst day of my life. I'm writing because I don't know what else to do. We waited for Helen to come home and waited. Kitsy Snow. The night drags on for the people who love Helen. At 1 a.m., her friend writes another journal entry. Still nothing. Will this night ever end? Kitsy Snow.
They have some difficult decisions to make, and at 3 a.m., Kitsy makes another entry.
We are trying to decide when to call her mom and dad. We know something is very wrong. I think we should call them. If it was my daughter, I'd want to know.
Their instincts have been right all along. Something is very wrong. Tragically, it couldn't be worse.
Approximately 9 a.m. the next morning, a woman and her son drive along Daniels Park Road in northern Douglas County.
The boy says, "Mom, there's a body out there." It's an empty field of brown scrub with patches of snow. But in the distance, there's something that appears to be a body.
female passerby had noticed her body in the field and alerted a county man who was driving a snowplow, a county worker, and he called the police.
9:18 a.m., Douglas County Sheriff's Department receives the report of the body found about 1.6 miles south of the Colorado Highway, I-470.
By 9:41 a.m., investigators are roping off the scene. The coroner arrives 9 minutes later and pronounces the unidentified victim dead. By 10:20, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation arrives on the scene to join police.
Helene's hands had been tied behind her back. She was naked from the waist down. She was still wearing her coat and her turtleneck sweater.
It is clear that the victim has been stabbed and sexually assaulted. Officers examine the scene for clues when an unexpected ID is made.
One of the Arapahoe County Sheriff deputies, who works part-time at a local radio station, arrived and immediately recognizes the new intern at the radio station, Helen Przinski.
Helen Przinski is born in 1958. Her parents are Henrietta and Chester, and she's the youngest of 3 children. Her brother Chet and her sister Janet, who considers Helen her best friend. She's a huge baseball fan and memorizes the team's players and positions. Her father, a veteran, works as an engineer. In 1972, he takes a new job and the family moves to Hamilton when Helen is a high school freshman. Helen attends Hamilton Wenham Regional High School. She's an A student, active at school, aspiring journalist, and belongs to a singing group called Club Harmony. She's known as kind, strong, involved, and happy. She attends prom with her boyfriend Jonathan Shaler. Helen looks to be on track for an exceptionally bright future.
She was everything that you'd want your child to be. She was a leader, she was beautiful, she was kind, she was talented, smart.
Helen Przinski goes to study journalism at Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts.
In late 1979, Helen and classmate Kitsy Snow leave the confines of their home to put their learning into action and get some work experience in Denver, Colorado.
You are now tuned in to your #1 radio station.
She came out here to do an internship with her friend Kitsy. They lived with Helen's aunt down in Englewood, Colorado.
Helen is thrilled to be working in the news department of a Denver radio station and is quickly assigned a big story, a follow-up to the killing of a Secret Service agent in the field office. In fact, the day before her murder, her boss singles her out for praise.
In the dirt along the edge of the 2-lane road, they find tire tracks. One set from a motorcycle, covered by a set of impressions from a car or truck.
There were some cowboy boot tracks leading from the road to her body. They were able to determine a roundabout size of the boot and that it was a Western boot.
Her hands are bound with vinyl straps. Investigators later collect hair and semen evidence.
There is a pool of blood under her body on the ground, and a large blood stain on the back of her coat.
In 1980, there wasn't such a thing as DNA, right? And the Colorado Bureau of Investigations came out to the scene. In those days, they processed scenes like this for local agencies because the sheriff's office, we just didn't have that technology. We didn't have crime scene investigators. So they came out and they processed the scene and...
Detectives take plaster casts of the tire tracks and footprints. Also gathered from the scene are an empty milk carton, some bread, and an old can.
In a restroom at a nearby park, there's clothes burning in a toilet. Officers recover what's left of a pant leg, a boxed container for a stove, and several burnt rolls of toilet paper.
They just found some burned clothes in a bathroom near where she was killed. They weren't able to ever determine if they were related or not. And they think ultimately they decided no, they were not related. There wasn't a lot of information about that in the case, but it was definitely a red herring, so to speak.
Around noon, Helene's aunt and uncle and Kitsy Snow have heard on the news about a woman's body being found, and they're desperately trying to stay positive.
But police arrive at 1:30 p.m. to break the news that the victim is in fact Helen Brzezinski.
Helene's parents fly in and arrive at the house around 4 p.m. When they see a priest waiting, they know the worst. Later, Kitsy writes in her journal,
I couldn't cry, just shake. I couldn't stop shaking. Kitsy Snow.
The news of the murder breaks, and then the police get a lead.
a woman driving on Daniels Park Road around 10:20 p.m. the night Helene disappears sees a man, 20 to 30 years old, possibly Caucasian, medium-length brown hair over the ears, possibly a mustache.
Authorities realized how crucial this chance sighting is, and they put her under hypnosis. She recalls even more detail.
A witness had seen some type of muscle car, possibly a Mustang, yellow or white, and they were able to do a composite sketch of the face of the person, the man who was seen at the trunk of the car.
Armed with a detailed sketch, the authorities now have something concrete that they may be able to use to catch a killer. A young woman is found in a field, brutally raped and murdered. But a passerby gets a clear view of a man in the vicinity of the killing. Using hypnosis, a highly detailed composite sketch is made public. Police comb the area around Helen Brzezinski's bus stop, where they believe she was likely to have been abducted.
You're racing the clock when you've got a homicide, and every officer knows it. You want to get a lead in the first 48 hours, while people's minds are still fresh and the evidence hasn't yet been degraded or destroyed.
The radio station where Helen was interning offers a reward for the capture of the killer. And officers are inundated with tips from the public.
Police canvass all possible areas and follow up on each and every lead. With such a detailed composite sketch, someone must have seen something.
A mass is held for Brzezinski in St. Paul's Church in Hamilton, Massachusetts, and a memorial mass the following month. Brzezinski's friends and family, her former classmates or teachers, they're all in total shock.
The autopsy reveals that Helen Brzezinski is raped and stabbed multiple times in the back.
Forensic officers process a swab taken from the victim. Forensics also examine the footwear casts taken from the crime scene.
They appear to have been left by a Western-style boot with a size range of 9 to 11. As police try to put all the clues together, an eerie similarity to two other cases becomes obvious.
There were several murders up and down the Broadway corridor during that time in Colorado. It was a dangerous area.
In 1968 and 1970, there are two other similar murders in the same area.
And just a few weeks earlier, a woman is raped not far from Brzezinski's bus stop.
The very night Helene Brzezinski vanishes, another woman is grabbed when she tries to get off a nearby bus. It seems likely that all of these cases could be related to Helene's disappearance and murder.
But is there any connection between the women who were attacked?
She was supposed to be here for a few weeks, and she was killed during her second week here in Colorado.
Which makes it likely her killer was a stranger. A random attack is one of the most difficult cases to solve, especially in 1980, before DNA is used the way we've come to expect.
The composite sketch isn't getting any results. As the days pass, police have very little to go on.
We're doing everything we can to run down leads, but after that, you know the way it goes, especially when the victim is new in town. Carl Whiteside, Deputy Director of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Investigators believe there is a link between Helen Brzezinski's murder and the two other slayings in the Denver metropolitan area years earlier.
But there's nothing they can do to prove their theory or find the killer.
Despite the preserved samples taken from the body, technology does not allow authorities to connect the dots. The case stalls, and the tragic killing looks fated to be filed away with other unsolved murders.
But despite all appearances, this story isn't over yet. Brzezinski's family and friends are not going to let her memory fade, and they're not going to give up looking for her killer.
I saw Helene's parents, and I just promised them that I would not stop for as long as I was living and doing everything in my power to find Helene's killer, Kimberly LaTourette, friend of Helene Brzezinski. The following year, the investigation into Helene Brzezinski's murder goes cold, and it will stay cold for almost 2 decades.
But as we know, some of the most daunting cold cases have a way of thawing.
Helene's case was well known in the sheriff's office and in the area in Douglas County. Whoever worked on it was passionate to find her killer and bring them to justice. Director of CBI at the time was forward-thinking. They saved the DNA and stored it properly over the next several decades.
And because family, friends, and police never forget this brilliant young woman who had her life cruelly ripped from her, the unbelievable happens.
The case of a brutal rape and murder of a bright young student goes cold. Her friends and family vowed to never stop hunting for the killer. Evidence taken from the crime scene waits on the shelf while technology slowly advances.
By the late 1980s, DNA is commonly used to solve crimes, but its reach is still limited, and Brzezinski's case remains a cold file.
But the search for her killer comes into view again when a dark avenue of investigation comes to light.
There were several possibilities or similarities to other cases, but they weren't Helene's killer.
In 1976, Kenyon Battles Tollerton tries to abduct Janelle Shepard from a mall's parking lot by hiding in the back seat of her car, but is foiled by a passerby. Tollerton is arrested. He's also a suspect in the murder of Holly Andrews, age 16, who disappears on December 26, 1976, after leaving her mother's home in Littleton. Her naked body is found by skiers the next day. She has been sexually assaulted and stabbed to death. In 1980, the same year as Helene's murder, Donna Wow's half-dressed corpse is discovered in a field in Arapahoe County, Colorado, an area less than an hour from where Helene's body is found.
Tollerton is out on probation when he is charged with the first-degree murder and rape of Donna Waugh. In 1981, he pleads guilty to second-degree murder to avoid the death penalty. But by 1991, he is again out on parole.
In September 1993, 14-year-old Sissy Foster's partially clad body is found in a remote area of Denver. Like Helene Brzezinski, she is raped and stabbed multiple times.
Police arrest Tollerton when they find a link to Sissy Foster's murder from a blood sample taken from Tollerton when he was serving his 1980 sentence.
In 1994, he is sentenced to life plus 48 years for the murder of Sissy Foster.
Authorities make the connection that the killings perpetrated by Tollerton and Brzezinski's rape and murder are eerily similar.
Almost 2 decades later, Douglas County's sheriff forms a task force that includes the Englewood Police Department and the CBI. They reopen Helen Brzezinski's case. There's a re-examination of all the evidence from 20 years earlier.
They have Helene's coat from the crime scene, but discover it's never been submitted for DNA testing.
They were able to take that coat, take that DNA, and send it to a private lab who extracted the DNA from that sample and create a DNA profile.
The results are uploaded to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, known as CODIS, a national DNA information repository.
There are millions of profiles from known criminals and unsolved crimes where state labs and local crime labs compare DNA profiles, like the profile of Kenyon Tollerton.
There was some hope there, right? Oh, great, we have this new tool. Maybe we can catch him that way. Unfortunately, when they put Helene's killer's DNA in CODIS, there was no match.
But not only is Tollerton ruled out, there are also no matches for her killer at all. This is not what officers were hoping for.
But in 1998, it's still a limited process that works best at comparing specific DNA profiles. In terms of casting a wide net, the technology just isn't there yet.
Years pass, and the case is re-examined again and again, when finally there's a result.
DNA leads to 8 women who may have been related to the killer, but it's another dead end.
In 2017, genetic genealogy has been integrated into DNA searches.
DNA can now be uploaded to an open source database, and officers can now find people who are related to a perpetrator. From there, a family tree can be built up with the person being sought residing somewhere within.
When that family tree is large, it's a massive task.
In 2019, Douglas County Sheriff's investigator, Shannon Jensen, begins that work in the Helen Brzezinski case. The DNA produces a match of 3,000 individuals who are related to the killer.
As a detective, I remember feeling a little overwhelmed. I have to dig in there and figure out if I can solve this. So it's a little overwhelming. You need to be meticulous and tenacious and patient.
And it really comes down to old-fashioned sleuthing with a huge swath of people. There are, understandably, some false starts.
We have law enforcement databases, a couple that I used in particular, that you could just type in someone's name and try to get their address and information.
Detectives find another possible suspect in Arizona.
She sees him toss a water bottle into the trash. She grabs it and sends it to the lab.
The detective work is painstaking, time-consuming, and it must be done. This time, there's no match. He's not the man. So she goes back to the list and tries again.
Meanwhile, Jessie Still, a Georgian woman with a fascination for true crime, buys a DNA kit and loads her information onto an ancestry site.
But within 2 months, she is contacted by the Douglas County Sheriff's Department in Colorado. Miss Still is identified as a distant cousin to a suspect in Helen's murder case.
Still is aware of ethical concerns over genetic DNA sites being used for criminal investigations, but she opts in on the website, allowing law enforcement to use her DNA profile.
First, I thought maybe it was a joke or a prank. Nobody ever wants to think about being related to the killer, Jessie Still. No one in Still's immediate family knows the suspect.
She was raised by her aunt, and she told me a story about these 2 boys that her Aunt June had. There was a talk show back in the 90s that wanted to reunite family members for Thanksgiving because of the talk show. They had found her long-lost son. So he came out. She told me he was very different. He acted funny. He was strange. He came, and then he just bailed. And she said there was a newspaper article written about that visit, and it had both of the sons' names in them, but I can't remember what they are. My aunt might have the article. So she went back to her aunt, and she said, yes, my aunt has the article. I said, great, can she share it with me? She said, yes. So she sent me the article, and it had both of her sons' names in it, William and James Clinton. I had this feeling in the morning, and it sounds a bit corny or cliche, but I had come to work, and I just had this feeling that I was gonna know the name of her killer very soon. I was filled with adrenaline. My mind was moving faster than my body. I wanted to run their names and get their criminal histories, which I did right away. I was frantic. In other words, I wanted to figure out which one of these guys was her killer.
DNA reveals that William White Jr. has a history of deviant sexual behavior, but is not a match. But White's younger brother, Curtis Allen White, has been convicted of raping a woman at knife point in Arkansas in 1975. He moves to Colorado in 1979. In 1982, he starts going by a new name, James Curtis Clanton. Detective Shannon Jensen traces Clanton's life, and after almost 4 decades, the dots finally connect.
I went back to my law enforcement databases and ran their names and learned quickly that Mr. Clanton was in Colorado during that time near where she was abducted and killed.
She tells Lieutenant Tommy Barella, who is an experienced officer but new to cold case work, I know who he is.
What they need now is a plan. To find James Curtis Clanton, a truck driver, and to collect a sample of his DNA to back up their theory.
The Helen Brzezinski case has an incarcerated serial killer as her likely rapist and murderer. But DNA rules him out. Detectives form a task force and enter the DNA of Helen's killer into a database, but the search comes back without success. But when a genetic DNA produces a match, officers believe they have this public enemy in their sights.
Detectives need to collect DNA to confirm the killer's identity. Douglas County deputies trace Clanton to Florida and follow him for days, waiting for their chance.
Then Clanton goes into a bar near his home outside Lake Butler, 30 miles north of Gainesville. He doesn't know police are on his trail.
It was decided that although Thanksgiving was coming, it asked him if they could stay out there a few more days to see if they could get anything else from him. That's when he went into that bar on a Sunday afternoon and had a beer out of that beer mug.
The bartender has been alerted, and when Clanton leaves, he carefully stores the mug under the bar.
Detectives seize the mug and bring it to Colorado for testing. And this time, it's a match. Just before 2 p.m., 2 Douglas County sheriffs stand alone in a quiet road outside Lake Butler, Florida, waiting as Clanton drives up in his truck.
Detectives come up with a ruse to make Clanton commit to certain facts. It's a preemptive strike against possible claims Clanton might come up with to protect himself, like that he had consensual sex with Brzezinski.
James Curtis Clanton is informed that they suspect his identity has been stolen and that someone has mixed him up in a multi-million-dollar securities fraud case.
These detectives, right off the bat, they look like IRS agents. They went up to him and they came up with this ruse. We just want to make sure that, you're not connected to this in any way, or, you're not a victim.
Clanton agrees to an interview to confirm he is not involved.
The officers continue on with their ruse.
After an hour, the officers believe they have what they need to cover their bases. Then, they review what the interview has really been about. They slide a picture of Helen across the table and ask if he recognizes her.
James Curtis Clanton denies it and requests an attorney. It is then he is advised, "We actually have your DNA in her and on her." Sergeant Attila Denes.
He's arrested for first-degree murder and kidnapping, handcuffed, and taken to a Florida jail.
He made a phone call to his daughter and said, "I did something a long time ago. I got caught. I'm gonna go away for a while."
After 40 years, they have a killer in custody. It turns out that Composite sketch from 1980 was incredibly accurate.
Clanton waives extradition and agrees to be flown back to Colorado to face his charges. But there's another big surprise.
At the airport, Clanton tells Lieutenant Barella that he wants to talk. Barella takes out his phone, hits record, and reads Clanton his rights. Unprompted, Clanton tells him that he knew the interview the previous day was about murder.
"'Cause I knew that was gonna come up and get me one day." James Curtis Clanton.
Completely unprompted, Clanton makes a big confession to the officer.
"I killed the girl they're accusing me of killing." James Curtis Clanton.
He was planning on kidnapping and raping a woman that night. He had identified a victim first, who got off the bus before Helen. She looked right at him and seemed too confident, so he decided not to attack her. And he saw Helen get off the bus, and he decided to make her his victim.
Clanton tells a horrifying story of abducting Brzezinski on the street, threatening her with a knife, and binding her hands while inside his vehicle. He tells her he's going to ransom her to her parents. She tries to tell him they have no money.
James Curtis Clanton drives Helen Brzezinski to a remote woodshed and rapes her. Then he pulls to the side of Daniels Park Road, walks her through the field, makes her get on her knees.
He said, "Don't turn around and don't call the police. Don't turn around. I'm gonna leave. I don't want you alerting anybody that this happened." And then he proceeded to stab her in the back 9 times. He told investigators that he blacked out or flashed, so to speak. Just stabbed her and kept stabbing her and left her there to bleed out.
And, as it happened with me on several occasions, for some reason or another, I just kind of step out of myself and watch myself do that. James Curtis Clanton. Clanton describes a childhood of abandonment and abuse at the hands of a pedophile in a foster home.
I showed him that newspaper article with a picture of his mom. I let him read it, and then he looked up at me after he was done and he said, "That's the first picture of my mother I've ever seen."
He admits to the abuse and murder of small animals. In 1975, he rapes a woman at knife point, and then the police pick him up. He's sentenced to 10 years and then receives parole after 4 years due to a prison oversight.
A former counselor tries to help Clanton and finds him a place to live. In a tragic twist of fate, it's mere blocks from Przunski's bus stop and her home with her aunt and uncle.
Clanton manages to escape justice for Helene's rape and murder, but then in Florida in 1998, he's arrested for domestic violence battery, and then in 2001 for domestic violence assault.
That rage has always stayed with me. I mean, I think every time something hurts me that bad, that I can't deal with it. I learned anger covers up pain. That's pretty much the basis of everything I've ever done. James Curtis Clanton.
Now, the man who was compelled to keep on hurting women has finally been stopped. But that's for the courts to decide. Clanton has managed to get paroled before.
James Curtis Clanton heads back to Colorado, the scene of his crime 40 years earlier, to meet the fate he always knew was waiting for him. Rapist and killer James Curtis Clanton is captured and returned to the place of his brutal crime. This is done by a group of dedicated officers who were part of an investigative team that spanned 40 years.
And now Clanton will have to face the consequences.
After prosecutors agree to take the death penalty off the table, James Curtis Clanton pleads guilty in a Castle Rock, Colorado courtroom.
Clanton's hearing is delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic.
But several months later, he appears before the district judge virtually. By pleading guilty, he agrees to a life sentence, and that portion is wrapped up in about 15 minutes. But there's much more ahead.
A sentencing hearing serves multiple purposes. It is a place where the victim and the perpetrator can be heard.
Helene's best friend, her sister Janet, has survived her parents, their brother Chet, and Helene.
Janet was the only living relative in her nuclear family that was still living. That's why it was so important to me to be able to tell her, hey, we got him.
Over a dozen people who loved Helene speak for over 3 hours.
It was a very emotional time. Many of us law enforcement officers cried. And when Janet got up and read her statement to James Clanton, it was very moving, and you could see on the video that he actually cried too. I do think there was some genuine remorse there. But, you know, Janet had a really hard time talking to him. She left the room after that. She didn't even want to look at him.
It gives me some peace knowing that this beast is in jail. But I don't think we'll ever have closure because Helene is not here. Janet Przunski Johnson.
Przunski's choir group also attends the hearing.
At one point, they came out here and retraced her steps and tried to find her killer. They were very vigilant and persistent with the detectives over time, making sure that her case was not forgotten. They came out every year to do choir singing. This was the last year that they were going to do it. And coincidentally, in 2019, her case was solved. So it's pretty amazing, the timing of everything.
Helene's close friend and housemate, Kitsy Snow, who sat up journaling into the night and praying for good news that never came, reads from the very same journal.
This has been the longest and worst day of my life. I am writing because I don't know what else to do. We waited for Helene to come home, and waited. Kitsy Snow.
Przunski's boyfriend of 40 years earlier, Jonathan Shaler, also bears witness. He provides a photo slideshow, accompanied by her singing with her college a cappella group, the Wheat Tones.
Helene Przunski's friends and family finally have their day in court. James Clanton doesn't speak for himself, but his attorney issues an apology on his behalf.
Clanton's capture and conviction depended on so much.
Advanced genealogy technology allows investigators to reach back into the past and connect it to the current day.
This new tool gave us the opportunity to reopen the case and identify a suspect. It's been a remarkable tool to utilize. Detective Shannon Jensen.
Regulations to protect people are important, but the use of genetic DNA is a crucial tool when finding the perpetrators of violent crime, when all other means have been exhausted.
He nearly got away with it. He could have just disappeared into the night.
Technology is nothing without determined detectives doing that old-fashioned police work and pushing forward through thousands of matches. This case is a triumph for cold case investigators.
Former Douglas County District Attorney George Brockler said it well.
I don't want anyone who thinks they've gotten away with murder to be able to sleep with both eyes closed. I want them to read stories like this and think, they're coming for me. Because we are. George Brockler.
Clanton could run, but he couldn't hide forever.
Because James Curtis Clanton commits his crime in 1980, his conviction must adhere to the rules of that time. Despite his life sentence, he can apply for parole after 20 years. He will be 83 years old. I had to win. I wanted to win for Helen. Detective Shannon Jensen.
I felt at times that she was with me, right? That she was in this case. She wanted all of us to find her murderer. I felt like she made this happen. She was there. And there were times when I felt that. That added to my drive. She drove me. She pushed me throughout this case.